Your friendship with Jimmy Page goes back to his time in the Yardbirds. Is there anything from that time period that you remember in particular?
He loved two of my guitars, dearly loved them. They were both 1952 Telecasters. And one in particular, which I still have them both, he wanted that guitar. He said, I love the way this plays. I love the way it sounds. I want this guitar. How about, and he had with him, Jeff Beck's Esquire.
Oh, that's cool.
That, Jeff had just left the band at that point, walked off and left, and he had left his guitar for Jimmy to play lead because Jimmy had been on bass with the Yardbirds.
Yeah.
And he switched over to guitar. In fact, side story, I remember sitting backstage in Murray, Kentucky, and the rest of the Yardbirds were kind of mumbling to each other, can Jimmy handle the lead guitar duties?
Really?
Well, yeah, we certainly know he can, but he to them was the bass player, a rhythm guitarist, But of course he could handle the lead guitar and did it brilliantly. But he had Jeff Beck's Esquire with him. And he said, I'll trade you Jeff's guitar for your Telecaster. I'll deal with Jeff later. But how about that? Huh? And I said,
Really?
I love this. My first electric guitar I ever had. I love this guitar. So I decided not to, and I still have it. But I've always wondered, I could have had Jeff Beck's Esquire. That would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty cool. But I mean, you got the guitar that he wanted, so that's pretty cool too,
Yeah, it's all good. I'm happy.
So how exactly did your relationship with the Yardbirds begin?
I played in a band in Memphis called Lawson and Four More, and we had just changed our name from Bobby and the Originals, and we were about to release our first single. And they got us, our manager got us on this show that was called the Dick Clark Caravan of Stars. And they were playing at a place called Skateland Fraser in Memphis, or in Fraser, actually outside of Memphis. And so we were on the show, and when I looked down at the people on the show, the other acts that we were opening for, we weren't on the Caravan, and we certainly weren't the Stars. But I looked down and I saw Gary Lewis and the Playboys, okay, yeah, and so, I think Bobby Hebb maybe was on it, okay. The Yardbirds, knowing that I was going to get to at least see the Yardbirds, maybe even meet them, I was really excited.
Yeah, for sure.
So we played the show, and I, of course, got right backstage and was chasing down all the Yardbirds and got to meet them. So then I found out they were coming back on another tour very shortly. And I decided, okay, I'm going to go to as many shows on that tour as I could, which ended up being 2 shows. And I would go backstage again, and I really hooked up with Jimmy Page at that point. This would have been 65, probably, something like that. And just talked to him. I told him that, I was working at Stax Records, which he loved that. I mean, he was just, believe it or not, he was wowed by that.
Really?
Maybe even more than me being wowed by the Yardbirds. That's hard to believe. But so we talked a lot about recording, and he loved the whole Memphis recording scene. Sun Records, of course, with Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and Johnny Cash and Roy Orbison and Carl Perkins. All the great acts that recorded were big favorites of the British guys and certainly of Jimmy. And then he loved also anything to do with Stax, Rufus Thomas, Booker T and the MGs, the things that we were recording at that time. So that the last show that they played that I saw was in Murray, Kentucky, at Murray State University, in the gym, and I talked Jimmy into riding back to Memphis with me instead of getting on the bus, so we could talk, because they were going to Memphis to fly out of there for the next shows. That was the closest airport city. So he said, yeah, let's ride back and we can talk more about Stax and Sun and Memphis music.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I said, yeah, I can talk more about Yardbirds and British music and whatever.
Yeah.
So we did, and we rode through the night, however long that is, 3 hours-ish, something like that. Got to Memphis at about 2 or 3 in the morning, and took him right over to Ardent Studios on National Street, which is also where I worked at the time. And that's where I had all my amps and guitars and all my equipment stored there. And of course, I drug all that out, and we sat through about 3 hours during the night and early morning playing guitars and just checking things out. So he got to see the studio, which was quite good. It was a very state-of-the-art studio at that time. And he got to see the equipment. We got to be really close talking about things, got along really well. So then about, 2 years later, more years later, 4 or 5 years later, well, I would correspond with him all the time then. He would send me cassettes of the first Led Zeppelin album, the second Led Zeppelin album before they were released. What do you think? You know, how so in fact, we exchanged jackets. I sent him my my Air Force pilot's jacket,
That's so cool.
tan leather jacket. And he mailed me his long British Navy coat that he had worn on stage so much with all the medals on it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which I started wearing on stage with put my own medals on it.
That's so cool.
That's how pitiful a fan I am.
That's awesome, man.
So but since he knew where I worked, what the studio was like, that it was, top class stuff, he called me up and said, look, we're working on our third album.
Okay.
We've got a tour booked, but we're not going to finish it in time. They were supposed to support the album with the tour. So he said, is there any way you could help me finish this at your studio? And I thought about it. Do I really want to do this? Nah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So I said, yeah, sure, come on. So what they would do is whoever was needed, always Jimmy and always Peter Grant, the manager.
Yeah.
Sometimes Richard Cole, the road manager, sometimes any of the other band members if they were needed for an overdub. So he would decide, what they were going to do. Jimmy was completely 100% the producer in charge. He was
That's awesome.
The man, absolutely. So they would fly in between shows. They'd finish a show wherever and fly to Memphis, and whoever, I would pick them up at the airport, drive them through. We'd go straight to the studio and start the work. I don't remember if they even stayed in hotels. Probably did.
That's cool.
But it was just, we only had so much time to work while there was a day off.
Yeah.
So we would do that several times until we had the album, everything recorded and mixed. More mixing than overdubbing. There was some overdubbing, but it was more mixing than that. And then at the end of that, I took Jimmy and Peter and I took the album over to a place called Mastercraft on Madison Avenue in Memphis, and mastered it to vinyl. Wrote the little inscriptions on the inside and all that sort of stuff. And that was it. And then once the masters were done, the actual acetate masters for vinyl, I think there were 2 sets made. They were boxed up very carefully. The mastering guy there does, they really carefully box them up and separate them and keep them pristine because they have to make records from those. And I put them in the trunk of my friend and partner, in the studio partner, John Fry's car, and drove them to Nashville, met up with the band there. And I handed the master box over to Richard Cole, the road manager. He took it to, I think, Indiana or someplace immediately and started the records pressing.
That is so cool, dude. So when, just on a friendship level, when going back to the beginning of the band, when you saw that Zeppelin first started to take off, what was your reaction? Like, I'm assuming you were happy for the band. Like, how did you react when you saw them just kind of taking off?
Oh, I loved it. I remember taking a cassette Jimmy had sent me of the first album to my friend John Scott, who was the big DJ on WMC FM in Memphis, and just playing it for him. And he was, holy hell, this is going to be something. I mean, all you had to do was put on the very first, let the needle drop on that record or start the cassette and hear the beginning of Good Times, Bad Times. And it was just, what is this? It was an anthem. It spoke volumes immediately to everybody that loved rock and roll music. Wow, this is different. This is exciting. This is powerful. And then song after song, good Lord, it was amazing. So I was over the moon that my friend had come up with this. It was just stunning.
That is so cool. So, seeing him over the course of, Zeppelin was what, from 68 to 1980? So yeah, for about 12 years. How did he, in your view, grow and develop as an artist over the course of the time with Zeppelin?
This will sound a bit crazy, but to be honest, in my mind, he was already at the very top from day one. Sure, everybody grows and changes a little bit, but what I mean is in general, the musical power that was in his brain was there from the very instant. It was there in the Yardbirds. He just hadn't been able to form it together yet, but and had the rightest people all in one room. But I think all that really happened over the time was that more and more of other people's things came out at the same time as more and more of Jimmy's amazing mental prowess infected everybody else. It was like this two things coming together. And of course, John Paul Jones was brilliant from the beginning too. Everyone was brilliant on day one, but Jimmy was already there. So I just saw a mixture and a melding and a grouping of things in the band. These things are hard to define.
Yeah, but I think that makes
struggling.
sense. I just thought of a random question. You know, I mean, when it comes to Zeppelin, a lot of people consider Peter Grant like the fifth member of the band, so to speak, right? What was Peter Grant like? Like was he a very aggressive person from what I understand? Like how was he to be around?
You know, around me and the band and whatever, he was a total sweetheart. He was like a great big teddy bear. He had been an ex-professional wrestler.
Yeah.
Big guy, very strong, very he could intimidate you if he wanted to, of course. But no, just working day to day, he was a lovely man. I really, really liked him. He was so devoted to the band. I mean, he really saw them not as his kids because they were too old for that, but really as a family. And he took care of them like I've never seen a manager take care of a band. He really, really loved them deeply. And of course, they were being so successful. You love that too, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But I have seen him in, I went to many concerts over the years, probably close to 50 or maybe even more than 50 Zeppelin shows live. And when he needed to be, like on one show, he saw what he thought were microphones out in the aisles of one of the shows. I think this may have been Baltimore. There were a tripod set up and something that looked like microphones out there. And he was furious. Somebody was recording Zeppelin from the show. So he charged out into there, grabbed the equipment, picked it up, threw it against the wall, smashed it all up. It turned out it was some scientists doing tests of levels during sound check to see how loud a band was or something.
Yeah.
But he could literally pick people up and throw them around. And I've seen him do things like that because he was taking care of the band. But so, yeah, he was two sides of him, very tough and aggressive when he had to be, but just a total sweetheart when you were there in private.
Do you remember first meeting him?
First meeting him. Wow. Oh, gosh. I don't remember if it was at a show, if there was a show first, because he was not at the Yardbirds shows that I'm talking about before, even though he did manage them at one point, I believe. But he wasn't at those shows. But so it either would have been at the first pickup at the airport when they came for the very first between shows recording and mixing thing, or I might have gone to a show before that and met him. I honestly don't remember though, but I'm like, he was much taller than that. I'm like 140 pounds. He's like 280 pounds or something. Big man. So if he wanted to just use that girth and bulk and intimidate somebody, he could certainly do it. But lovely man to me from the very first. Hearty handshake and a big hug, and off we went.